Joe Hopkins here, and copyright law is destroying modern music. But I've been thinking about it, not necessarily in the way that is most obvious to a lot of people. Now, I've watched a lot of very good videos on YouTube here about copyright and the problems with modern copyright law. I just watched a really good one by Adam Neely, and I've watched others by Rick Beato and a lot of other music YouTubers. Actually, I've watched it from almost every music YouTuber. It comes up a lot, and it comes up a lot because it's something we as musicians deal with a lot. Everybody's getting sued by everybody else nowadays. That's the way it feels. Except it's kind of not. Most of the lawsuits seem to be coming from people looking for a payday, like it's a shakedown, you know? And a lot of times, it's rich people buying copyrights to music and then suing newer artists, claiming they're using that, like the whole Marvin Gaye thing. They keep saying the Marvin Gaye estate or Marvin Gaye's people are suing. They're not. It's some rich guy that bought Marvin Gaye's copyrights. But the reason why I think it's destroying modern music, aside from the fact that nobody can make music without having to keep... Everybody's second guessing themselves as they write in the studio, as they record, second guessing themselves because they don't want to get sued. But beyond that, we have a certain musical vocabulary and always have. I mean, you listen to, I've listened to a lot of very early music recordings, right? A lot of the early blues stuff and jazz stuff, back when it was 78 RPM records. My great aunt left me a whole collection of 78 RPM records that were all like country western stuff. She was real big into the country western music of the day. And we're talking about the stuff from early recorded music, from the 20s and 30s. And I really like that stuff, but the more you listen to a lot of that early music, the more you recognize that the musicians of the time were using certain musical tropes. They were quoting, kind of like, you have those licks and riffs that everybody knows and everybody uses. And they were new once, but we don't know when that was. So now it belongs to everybody. Even right off the bat in the 20s and 30s, you hear jazz musicians and blues musicians and country western and folk and all these different musicians in early recordings using licks and riffs and musical concepts that were well used enough at the time that we know they came from a previous time before we were recording music. And these are forms of music that weren't written down. There isn't musical notation of them, so we don't know where some of these ideas got their start. But some of these ideas and some of these licks and little bits we're still using today. And every generation adds a little more musical vocabulary on top of what we already have. So as we've gone along, and now that we have recorded music, we can kind of follow it to a degree. We can see where certain licks start getting used, where a lot of artists will quote each other. That's like a jazz thing where you quote another artist. You'll literally throw part of their lick into what you're doing, referencing this other artist. And pretty soon everybody's quoting each other. I mean, the truth is you want people to know of you enough to reference you. That's a good thing. You want to reference other artists. That's a good thing. That's a nod to them. It's recognizing them. These are good things, and it's added to the musical vocabulary to the point where there are certain musical tropes that nobody can own. The 3 or 4 chord progression is so old that nobody owns it, right? The 12-bar blues, the 1-4-5. It's so common, nobody can say they own it. You can't copyright that because it's been around forever. But what if what's going on now had happened back then? What if copyright law and people suing each other had become a thing then? We wouldn't have this musical vocabulary. We wouldn't have the licks and riffs that everybody can play and everybody can have their own take on. And as most of the people watching this are musicians, I know you guys have some licks that you've learned that everybody plays, and you make them your own. You put your own spin on it. And it's gotten to the point now, in the 21st century, what is going to be our 21st century musical vocabulary? What's going to be the vocabulary that musicians have from this time period? And the answer is nothing. We're not allowed to copy each other. Don't reference anybody. Don't have a nod to anybody. Don't quote other musicians. Don't reuse anything. I mean, for God's sake, don't even write a beat that sounds similar to somebody else's beat, or you're getting sued. And what's worse is you have people buying up copyrights from artists from all the way back even to the 60s and suing people. They're taking away our musical vocabulary. And this younger generation coming up, I feel bad for this generation. They're a generation, I mean, I feel good for them in a lot of ways. There are a lot of things that are great in music, but one of the bad things is that you're not allowed to have a musical vocabulary. You're not allowed to have these sets of ideas and this language that you can use, that you can pull on, that in the future people will recognize it as, oh, that's very, 20 teens or 2020s. You can't do it. You'll get sued. And that's really a shame. I've noticed a lot of musical artists are really drawing on stuff that's like 50 or 60 years old now for their own recordings, because that stuff is so prevalent in music that you can't sue over it. Everybody's done it, kind of thing. You know what I mean? You have to go back to the stuff that is old enough that nobody owns. And I don't mean songs, melodies, lyrics. I mean the musical concepts. Those base building blocks you use to build a song. And we're just not able to build on anything recent anymore. And that really is a shame. Where would music be if we hadn't been able to do that in the past? And, you get the thinking about it. Where would rock and roll be if it couldn't have been built on the blues? Where would heavy metal be if it weren't built on that blues-based rock? Where would modern music be if they couldn't reference music from the past and not allowed to progress? And I think eventually people are going to get this figured out, but as it is right now, we're kind of running to a standstill with certain things. Now, there are certain musical concepts that really are very now. And there is a certain musical vocabulary that's very now. But to a degree, it is limited because nothing else is allowed to become part of the way we express music. There are certain things that you will get sued over. And I don't know if anybody's really properly expressed that. Like I said, I've watched a lot of videos on copyright law and the lawsuits that are going on. But I don't know if I've really heard anybody put it that way. I'm sure somebody has, but it's something that's been occurring to me that, some people have touched on it. Like I said, that video I watched of Adam Neely's that came out a little bit ago touched on that musical vocabulary and how it really is kind of the common ground for musicians. But really, what's it doing? And this is my question. What's it doing to our modern musical vocabulary? Will this generation right now have a part in the musical vocabulary of the future? Or is that being shut down? And that's kind of a valid question. It's a valid thought. Now, I know this video probably isn't going to get a ton of views, right? This isn't the kind of thing. This is my kind of rant that doesn't do that well. But for you guys who stuck around, tell me what you think. Leave a comment. Tell me your thoughts on it. Consider, let's say you're writing a song that you think will do well, right? Let's say you make it as an artist or you're well known and you're writing a song that you think would do well. Are you limited? Are you now limited in the way you feel you can express yourself because of copyright law? And that's kind of a valid thought. So anyway, thank you for listening to this. If you want a more in-depth look at that kind of thing, like I said, check out Adam Neely's channel or Rick Beato's channel. And they have videos that go much more into depth on it. I'm just giving you my thoughts off the top of my head. I'm not really putting together an educational piece here. It's not what I do. So I'm not good at it. If I was good at it, I would do that, but it's just not my forte. So just my thoughts. All right, hey, here's a shameless self-promotion part. Subscribe to my channel. Here at the in a minute, there's an end screen with playlists. Check out my playlists. Listen to my songs. Love me. See me. Listen to my shit and tell me how great I am. And I'll see you guys in the next video, all right? I love you guys. Peace out, baby. Bye-bye.